Welcome to the Poetry Podcast with A, an Amber Michelle's work production. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Poetry Podcast with A, where we do all different types of book reviews. Sometimes it's not poetry. Sometimes we talk about novels, historical fictions. We're talking about a memoir today and a poetry book, but we're going to start off with a poetry book. And before we dive into all of the reviews, I just want to apologize. My throat. I have been battling a little bit of an intense cold, so I'm getting better, but it's still kind of in here, so I apologize if my voice just isn't as smooth as some of you guys say. It just is still a little stuck. So that like gunky stuff still stuck in my throat. And also, when this comes out, I just wanted to say that my baby is probably going to be here. I hope he would be like 42, 43 weeks if he was still in me when this podcast releases. So you guys might see some content where it's like, my baby's here, but then in episodes that I'm releasing, I'm still pregnant. That is because I have to pre-record a couple of these episodes because I really need to stay on track. And if you're a mother, you know why I got to do it. Honestly, most of the world knows that having a baby is intense. So I'm just trying to stay prepared and not lose track of episodes and all that, just because I care and I love you guys. And I really, like I've said from the beginning, I'm committed to this podcast. And yeah, so I just wanted to clear the air there of like, wait, she's pregnant, but she has a baby. Did she, what? That is why I am pre-recording, which I think everyone can understand. So let's talk a little bit more about the book we are reading. Okay, so I actually am not doing book club on this book. I don't know if everyone would be as excited to read a book like this, but it's definitely needed if you are wanting to be a writer. I think it's so important not only to read just books in general, like novels or poetry books, but to sometimes also read a book about the craft of writing. You know, it's inspiring to read these books and you pick up new tips. And even if you feel like you know some of the tips already, it's always a good refresher. So the reason why I chose to pick a book that is about a memoir on the craft of writing is because of who our guest is next Thursday. This person has been appointed in our community to be the first Poet Laureate of Kansas City, Missouri, which is such an incredible honor. I wanted to review a book that was on the craft that we are all gathered here to talk about and discuss. So that is just why I kind of really switched it up this week to pick a book that was a little bit more informative and educational. So the book that I have been studying and reading is called On Writing, a Memoir of the Craft by Stephen King. And this book is extremely well known. It's one of the Times Magazine's top 100 nonfiction books of all time. It's very recommended for people who are really trying to get better in their craft of writing. And I had a lot of takeaways and I'm really excited to share them with you because it's those things like you think that you know everything, but it's always good to have reminders. So I really want to dive in. I actually wrote some notes because my mind right now can go in 5 million places. And I feel like when I watch these episodes, when I'm like editing the sound and stuff, I get off track and I miss things and I don't want to do that. So I do have some notes that I wrote. I typically write all my notes in this book, and then when I'm on this podcast, I can't read my notes, so I have started to type them, even though my notes for the poetry book we're going to review are in here. For this one, I had to be more organized. So if you see me like looking down, it's just to like get my thoughts. So really what this book is about is, of course, it's a part memoir, but also a part guide on the craft of writing. So it's really divided into 3 main sections. The first section is an autobiography of Stephen King's life, just his childhood, his rise to success, and in all the stuff that's in between, like getting rejected or about his drug and alcohol addictions. There's just things that I didn't know, and I really do love Stephen King. If you know me, you know I love a good horror film, and The Shining is a classic, and I honestly might reread that book this season because of how much I love horror. So I think I might actually do that. I am inspired to reread it. He talks about The Shining in here. Among all of his other books, he mentions a lot of them. But that's the one that I truly it's iconic to me. So that's like the first half of the book is just like his story of how he even got into writing. And to me, the beginning, I'm not gonna lie, it was a slow start for me. I don't know really why. I think I do know why. I think the reason why it felt like a slow start was because I really wanted to read this book and like dive into the section where he was going to give us tips and tricks about writing. And that really didn't happen until the second chapter. Or the second section, I should say. There's chapters in between. So if you were like me and you really wanted to read this book to gain insight in the writing process and his writing process, you gotta wait a little bit. Just hold on. In section 2, it really picks up. I had so many takeaways. So then in this section 2, the on writing section, he really uses this as an instructional guide for his practical advice for writers. And it really caught me in this section. This is where I started to feel hooked, and I was really, really enjoying this piece because there's things that I've heard before, but I kind of forgot. And there's this one sentence that he has that I wrote down that really stood out to me. And it was, "The road to hell is paved with adverbs." And I am just seeing that all over in novels now that I'm consuming, or if I'm listening to an audiobook, I can just tell, like, he also says, he kind of talks about it in this toolbox of have a mental toolbox of that you can like really pull out, just like an actual physical toolbox. You take out your tools and you can use them to fix things. Like you can use this mental toolbox to take out these kind of tips to help you continue to write. And one of the things in this is just vocabulary. Like that's just one, is like, don't dress it up with adverbs. Usually your first word that comes to mind is your best word. Definitely not the cousin of the word. And I loved that too, because I feel like sometimes if I'm just listening or like at an event listening to people, it's, oh my gosh, I'm getting confused by your sentence because it's so freaking long. And the ones that are just like simple to the point, they catch me more. And especially when I'm reading these like New York Times bestseller books, they have a certain flow that just keeps it moving. It's like you really don't have to dress up your words at all. And maybe if you feel like you're getting ashamed for such short sentences, just don't, because it's really obvious once you're trying too hard. And so I loved that piece of advice. And like another thing was in the toolbox is like grammar. And he gives an amazing book recommendation. I actually have this book, and my editor gave me this book. It's called The Elements of Style. And it was one of them, I've talked about it before. It's one of the most impactful books as a writer. It's so short. It's like 80 pages, but it really provides such simple grammar. It's helped, or grammar tips, but it's helped me so much in my writing game. It's incredible. So I read it quite often. It's like one of those books I have around. I will never gift it. I've said that before, and I still will never gift it because it's just one of those books that you need to always have in your bag. Pull it out. That book is in my toolbox, in my physical toolbox, because it helps me with grammar all the time. If I have a question, that's what helps. Also, in this book, and also the book that we're reviewing right now, so The Elements of Style and with Stephen King, they both talk about active and passive verbs. So you want to be active. You want to be writing active. So for example, what does that even mean? Like the difference between an active verb or a passive verb. So this is an example that Stephen King gives. So this is the sentence he provides us. It's the difference between the meeting will be held at 7 rather than the meeting is at 7. So let me say that one more time. The meeting will be held at 7. The meeting will be held at 7. The meeting will be held at 7 rather than the meeting is at 7. The meeting is at 7. The meeting is at 7. Okay, so the reason why I repeated that so many times is because which one caught you more? The meeting is at 7. Like my brain just went there quicker rather than the meeting will be held at 7. There's so much more in there that you don't need. You can just be active with it. So I love that advice. And again, I've been seeing it everywhere. So that was super fun to learn about again. And it really, you can tell Stephen King also read this book, The Elements of Style, or like has it in his toolbox, because there was a lot of the same themes in this section. So it was cool to hear from just like a different perspective of a person writing on grammar. It's really, really powerful. So other things that he talks about like in the writing toolbox is just like style, plot, character development, dialogue, all these different themes of writing, and you really dive into it. And he also kind of talks about when to revise, when to write, and when to revise. So the best advice he gave in this section was when you are writing, write with the door closed. And then when you are revising, write with the door open. And I was just like, wow, that's so true. You want to be shut off to the world when you write. You don't want any distractions. You really want to have a consistent routine. So your body just knows, like the same thing when you go to sleep, like you want to shut off the lights, you want to kind of turn on your lamps or your candles. So your body knows that it's time to go to sleep. And so with writing, it's like, what is your step by step? And he gives very specific advice for new writers of what the routine should be. Like he says, you should not be by a window. You should absolutely not have your phone or television or screen, because those are distractions. And then maybe like once you kind of gain up to some momentum, you can like open up the window. But he really suggests not to, because like there's things outside that you can get distracted by, or like even writing in like a coffee shop. I mean, I wrote in a coffee shop a lot when I was writing my book just because it was a vibe for me. But for very new writers, he suggests like, no, like you're cut off to the world. And I thought that was pretty good advice. And in that beginning section, a piece that really stood out to me was how he gave the advice of rip your TV out of your house because he learned to write before television, and now he's like, it's sucking the life out of people. Like, television is terrible to be getting into writing. And I know this because when I wrote my book, I wasn't watching any television. It wasn't really for writing. It was because of my sobriety. It was just like, for some reason, triggering to me, television, probably just because of like the things I consume just have alcohol in them and those things. And I was really trying to like separate myself. So really, like the first year of my husband and I dating, we didn't even watch a movie together until 1 year in of our relationship. So it was pretty wild of just like this ripping that out of my life, and it really helped me finish my book. So I was like, wow, that really is such good advice. Like, if someone keeps on being like, oh, I can't finish this book, can't do this and that, I'm like, are you watching television? Because if you are, stop. And that was such good advice. I'm kind of in a kick of where after my book and my book launch party, I definitely picked up watching television again. But I really want to stop. And I actually told my husband, we like really wanted to just spend more time together, be more present with each other. And I was like, okay, I'm going to stop watching shows and you can stop doing this and that. And we both agreed to it. And I think it's been better for us. I feel like we've definitely been more present. And again, like, I didn't stop watching television for writing, but I've been doing it for other things in my life. And I see how soul-sucking a screen can be. I actually don't even have a television in my house. I've been pretty open about that. But I can still watch shows on my computer. So that was the piece that I really had to like shut down. Like, it's easier though once it's a computer, because it's like you can just shut your laptop and put it away. If you have a big television screen, it's like always staring at you. It's like a black mirror. But when people come over, they're like, wait, where's your TV? They start to panic for me. I'm like, no, it's okay. The walls are filled with art for a reason. They're prettier to look at. So I just loved that. That might have been one of my favorite takeaways of this entire book. And that was in the section 1 part of like the autobiography. That was a little bit slower. So I still, even in that first section, had really great takeaway, and that I just really loved learning about. So I kind of talked about that first section, and then the second section, and then there's a third section, which is about on living. So in this like postscript, it is like a final reflection on Stephen King's life, and it kind of becomes present day when he's writing this. This was like in the it was in 1999. So it was a little farther back in time, but it's present day when he's writing it. And he gets hit by a van when he's on a walk at one of like his lake houses or something. So he had to regain all of his routines in a new way. And it was really, this piece just felt so inspiring of just living your life with purpose and how to restructure it. Especially with someone that has battled with addiction issues, this piece just felt really fulfilling. And I thought it was a really great way to end the book, because it just really highlighted his determination to continue writing despite of physical or emotional changes. So I really appreciated this ending of the book. I thought it was a really great way to end. It's like he had this like autobiography and then gave all the tips and then finished with just where he was at then in his life. And yes, it was a struggle, but it was also an epiphany that he had. So it was beautiful. And just like overall with this book, like the tone was super conversational. It was candid. It had practical approaches. And it just really was educational. I felt like there were so many more tips in the book that I'm not even getting into. Let's see what this page count is. Oh my gosh, I'm out of breath, y'all. It's around like 320 pages, I would say. So it's a good read. I read it in a weekend. Surprisingly, I read it in a weekend. I was out of town. I feel like I can always read better when I'm out of town for some reason. It's just like my excuse to be like, bye everyone, I'm gonna go read now. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that you have to put on your list, especially if you're a writer that is really needing to step into a flow. I highly recommend put it on your list on writing a memoir of the craft. And the last thing that I would love to share is a word that I learned. Of course, when I'm reading, I am learning new words all the freaking time. And there was multiple words that I learned inside this book, but the one I'm going to share is erroneous. It's spelled ERRONEOUS. Erroneous. And it means wrong or incorrect. It's an adjective. So of course, you probably knew. You're a lot smarter than me, but I didn't know what that word meant, and I really liked it. Erroneous. I just liked the way that it sounded. So that's the word I chose to share. So if you are wanting to get inspired, or not even just inspired, but like learn some practical ways to improve your writing, pick up the book On Writing, A Memoir of the Craft by Stephen King. It's available at the Kansas City Public Library. So go pick your book up today. Okay. The next book that we are going to cover is a beautiful poetry book. And I kind of mentioned this in the beginning of who we are highlighting this next Thursday, and their name is Melissa Ferrer Seville. She is the first Poet Laureate of Kansas City, Missouri. And if you're curious of what that means, it is just such an honor to get this award. It was so inspiring to watch them get this award, because Mayor Lucas appoints this person to be the Poet Laureate. And I was in PT's, the coffee shop in Crossroads, and I was just kind of doing a little research before we had our conversation together, and I started tearing up at this. The people that were there supporting Melissa was just so powerful, and it was just very interesting to dive into our conversation about what it means to be a Poet Laureate, so that in our next episode we really cover everything. And right now I would say go purchase this book that she put out. She put it out. It was her debut book in 2020. And she's a little coy. She's a little shy about this book, because I think she's just evolved to such a different level of writing, and especially like she expresses that. But the book that is out now that you can purchase from places like Turnsel, the bookstore in Crossroads, I would say West Side Crossroads area, is called Birthing Pains. And I was super excited. I loved the title because I'm going to be having some birthing pains soon. But it's not about physical birth. It is a metaphor for stepping into the person you want to be. And learning more about Melissa's life was so interesting. I can't believe it. She's such a spiritual being. She has such a spirit that when you are in the room with her, or if you are watching her on stage, it is palpable. Her spirit is palpable. You can feel it, taste it, smell it. Like, she is just everything and more. So she actually is very active right now in the community. Since she's the Poet Laureate, she's picked up a lot more speaking engagement gigs. So if you see that she is on stage somewhere, I highly recommend you go and visit where she's at, because she's incredible. But to dive more into this poetry book, I know she is shy about it because, she's going to be putting other things out there that she's probably more proud of or whatever. These are coming from her words though, not mine. And like the vibe she gave me when I wanted to talk about the book, but it is still incredible. It's a very spiritual book, I would say. Like even just some of like the thoughts that came to my mind of like putting it into like really quick sentences or words, of what this book is about. It's like oneness, peace, a searching with a finding, a lostness and a found, hope. And there was just a lot of inner child work within her poems, really finding yourself when you're a little bit lost. And that is just a type of story that all of us can relate to. I would really love to read 2 little quotes that stood out to me and that we do talk about in the next episode. She dives so deep. She has so much depth. So really check out this next episode if you want to learn more about her. Okay, this one really stood out to me. Someone told me you aren't stuck in traffic. You are traffic. That chaos is not the world around you, honey. It is you. Like, there's this person in my life and they just constantly blame everyone else for problems. And they never take accountability. And I'm like, yes, you have to take accountability. You are the traffic. If you are constantly stuck in traffic, maybe you are it. That line really stood out to me. And then another one that really stood out to me was, the devil looks like God in disguise. The devil looks like God in disguise. Isn't that so much truth right there? Oh, there are so many lines like this. Those are just 2 that stood out to me, but I have so many more written down in this little red book of mine. So overall, this book, I should say chapbook, The Birthing Pains, is one you have to read if you are looking to really ignite and light up your soul again. If you're looking for that big piece of light that is poetic and has all the imagery in the world, Birthing Pains is a read that you should pick up. Again, I said you can buy it at Turnsoul Books, and Melissa is the type of person that you have to see in person. So I highly recommend next Thursday you tap into our conversation. We go all over in directions of where we're going. Like I could barely press stop and like cut off our conversation because there were so many things I wanted to dig into more and find more out about their story. So please tune in and support our Poet Laureate next Thursday, and I will see you then. Bye, guys. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Leave me a review on your favorite listening channel, Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. I'd love to hear from you. Always with love, A.